Hey everyone, Jim here, and in this video I'm going to show you how to install a TLS SSL certificate on your Azure VM that's running Apache, so that way you can have secure communication using HTTPS. So in the first video we set up this Azure VM that's running Apache, and we have a public IP address, and it's using just standard HTTP, that's Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is an insecure protocol where if anybody is snooping on the network, they're going to be able to see what we're doing in clear text. So what we want to do is create a TLS SSL certificate and then install it onto our web server so we can use HTTPS, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol Secure, and which is a much better option. Before we do this though, we're going to need a domain, and you have two options. You could go off and register a domain. So if you want to do this for real, you can go ahead and do that. But for students in my class, and if you're just learning, you can create what's known as a host override. In my class, we use pfSense. So for students in my class, please log into the pfSense firewall using the IP address and our lab documentation. I'm going to do this in my home lab, which has a different IP address that's not going to work for anybody outside of me. So your IP address for your pfSense firewall is going to be different. So you want to sign into pfSense and then go under Services and select DNS Resolver. Once you do that, you can scroll down all the way to the bottom, and under Host Overrides, you can select Add, and you're going to type in the domain name discountjuiceshop.com. For the IP address, you're going to enter in that IP address that you had from Azure, that public IP address. Then all I got to do is scroll down and click Save, and then Apply, and voila, like magic, if you go to discountjuiceshop.com, it should load your web server. And again, keep in mind, your public IP address for your Azure virtual machine is going to be different than mine. Great. So now the next step is going to be to create a certificate signing request. Essentially, it's going to have information about our web server, and then we're going to send that off to a certificate authority. They are going to essentially then dump out a certificate that we're going to be able to install on our Azure VM. So let's go ahead and move over to our terminal. And I'm going to do this from within my Azure virtual machine. And I'm going to run first a command to generate my private key. And this is going to use a tool known as OpenSSL. OpenSSL is incredibly common and popular. It's used for generating certificate signing requests, which are oftentimes referred to as CSRs, for creating self-signed certificates, and more. There's a lot of great functionality built into OpenSSL. So this first command is going to be a command to generate our private key. So OpenSSL gen RSA. The type will be AES256, and we are going to do -out and specify the key name. We'll do discountjuiceshop.com, and we'll put the key strength in as of 2048. It's going to ask us for a passphrase. Sure, I'll enter in a passphrase. And there is our private key file. One thing I should probably do is I should name this something to do with a private key. Otherwise, I'll probably get confused about what this file's for. So I'm just going to rename this. Ideally, you would type in a better name, like as an example, something like that. That'd be the better way to do it. And, actually, I'll just generate a new private key. Let's go like that. And I have two private keys. Going to delete my old one. Ta-da! So I got my private key. It's named something a little bit more obvious. So now I need to generate a CSR, or a certificate signing request. This is essentially going to be the request that I'm going to present to the certificate authority, which is oftentimes known as a CA, and they're going to issue a certificate for us to install onto our web server. So once again, we are going to be using OpenSSL. I'm going to run OpenSSL REQ for request -new in -SHA-256 using my key, discountjuiceshop.com _key.pem. And we're going to create the CSR with the name of discountjuiceshop.com _CSR.pem. And this is going to put us into a menu to do different things. So first off, it's asking me to enter in my passphrase for my private key. Country code, United States, state, Wisconsin, locality, organization name, Waukesha County Technical College, organizational unit name, I'll skip that, common name. This is very, very important. You want this to match the name of your domain, your fully qualified domain name, FQDN. So discountjuiceshop.com. That is the host override I put into my pfSense firewall. Enter. Email address, not needed. Challenge password, not needed. Optional company name, don't need that. And then ta-da, I have my CSR. So I'm going to take the CSR and have it signed by my certificate authority. In my class, we're going to use a certificate authority called GoatFatty. So for those of you that are in my class, you can go to that IP address. And those of you that aren't in my class, you can find a certificate authority of your own to have someone to have it sign your CSR. Good examples, if you wanted to do this for real, is you could do something like, would be a good example for this. You know, if you're not in my class, I'd probably recommend just using something like Let's Encrypt. But that's a different story for a different day. So my CSR looks something like this. And this isn't super confidential. What I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to bring this over to my GoatFatty certificate authority and have it sign the certificate. So bear with me as I do that. So here is my GoatFatty certificate authority. I'm going to paste in that certificate signing request, making sure that I have both the heading and the footing inside of this request, making sure that it's in this block format. If it's one giant line, you may run into some issues. And I'm going to say, sign my CSR. And if all works, this is going to spit out a CSR that I will copy and paste into a text file and install into my Apache virtual machine. And just like that, we have our certificate. So I'm going to save this into a text file. I'm going to copy this, save it to a text file. And I'm also going to download a copy of the root certificate authority certificate and the intermediate certificate authority certificate. You're going to want both of these because we're going to put both our server certificate, our root certificate, and our intermediate certificate onto our Apache server. You need all three of these together so we can have a full certificate chain. That's going to be really important. If you don't have that and you're in my class, you're going to lose some points. And it's good to have the full chain in your certificates when you install them onto Apache. All right, so I saved the certificates into 3 files: the server certificate, certificate authority certificate, and the intermediate certificate. So I'm actually going to combine the certificate authority certificate and the intermediate certificate into a single file, but I'll do that in a few minutes. There's some housekeeping things we first want to do on our Azure VM. All right, so what I'm going to do is I want to create a new virtual host for our Discount Juice Shop website. This isn't a requirement per se, but Apache works really well to host multiple domains or websites off of just one server. And you do this by creating a virtual host record. So to do this, what we're going to do is I am going to go into /etc/Apache2. And within this directory, this is where a lot of the Apache configurations are included. And I'm going to move into sites available. And I'm going to make a new configuration file for our Discount Juice Shop website. So I'm going to say, let's see, I guess I could use Nano or Vim, it doesn't matter. I'll use Vim, see if that's installed. Great, it is. and I'll do vim, and I'll do djs.conf. Go in insert mode using the I key on my keyboard. And I'm going to create a virtual host record for DJS. And this first one is actually going to be a redirect because I'm going to be setting up HTTPS in a second. So I'm going to copy this over from my notes, and I'm going to change just a couple of settings. So first off, my notes. I got some extra spaces in here, which I don't like. Clean that up a little bit. Much better. And in my host override, I just did discountjuiceshop.com, not without the www. So I'm going to adjust my example. And what this is going to do is whenever someone tries to access my web server on port 80, this is going to redirect them to my HTTPS version, which is secure. So I can exit out of here using escape, WQ to write and quit. Boo, I needed to be sudo. That's a huge bummer. So let me just copy this out of here and try once more. Copy selection. Quit out of here. Boo. There we go. Escape. Right, quit. Now we're good to go. So we also then want to set up a virtual host for HTTPS. And I guess I could have done this in the same example. I'll save this for a second, and actually maybe I'm just going to go back in here, and I am going to comment off this line for now. And to do a comment in Apache, it's just a $. And I also need to make a directory called var www.djs. And the reason why I'm going to do this is because I said the home directory for this is under var www.djs. And without that, not going to work. So make a directory called DJS. Great. So now I want to enable this virtual host. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do sudo a2en site and say DJS. That is going to configure Apache, so when someone accesses the Discount Juice Shop website, it's going to redirect them over to the DJS directory. And how does it do that? Well, it's a server name Discount Juice Shop. So when I access discountjuiceshop.com, which is the alias, it's going to redirect to that home directory. And that's what the command did. It added in that virtual host. So we want to reload Apache. I'll do a sudo at the front. And it reloaded. So a reload is different than a restart. A restart will terminate the services and relaunch them, versus a reload will just essentially reload the configuration. So reload and restart are similar, but different. For configuration changes, reload will work. So at this point, if you get an error message, that means there's something wrong with your Apache configuration and you'll have to do some troubleshooting. And again, to keep this video kind of straightforward, I'm not going to do any troubleshooting in this video. It's mostly just example work. So with that new virtual host configured, if I reload my domain, you'll see instead of getting that default web page, I get the index of directory listing. And just to have some fun and kind of make this a real website, I'm going to go into the DJS directory and I will just go in and make a new file called index.html and say, welcome to my wonderful discount juice shop. Boo, I forgot that I need to be in as sudo. That is going to mess me up for the rest of this demo. Now by default, that nice HTML page will load because it's set as the index file, index.html. So still no HTTPS. So now we get the joy of being able to configure our certificate that we just had generated from our certificate authority. So let's move over to Etsy, Apache 2, sites available, and take another look at our djs.conf file. I'm going to add in a second virtual host file that's going to point to some certificates that I've not quite yet copied over. So I'm going to copy over another virtual host config. Back in insert mode. I'm going to put it right under here. And just like before, I have some cleanup I need to do. And again, I'm not using www in this example. So let's go through that. I'll re-enable the redirect by deleting my comment. So the way this is going to work is if someone accesses Discount Juice Shop on port 80, it's going to redirect them to port 443 with HTTPS. If someone accesses Discount Juice Shop on port 443, just over standard HTTPS, it's going to keep them there and load our home directory. Now, this is the important stuff. All of this SSL stuff is going to be our certificate. So you first have to say SSL engine on. You have to point to a certificate file that'll have named djs.cert. You have to have the location of the private key file. And again, the private key is already on Azure. It's in the home directory of my user account. And then you also have this thing called the bundle file. This bundle file is going to contain your root certificate and your intermediate certificate. And maybe a better way to phrase this instead of bundle would be chain. The file name doesn't matter. I'll call it just chain.crt to keep the language consistent. So after that, I will be able to save and quit. And I need to configure my certificates. If I were to just reload Apache at this point, it's going to crash. So it says it failed because I don't have the certificates copied over. The certificates need to match these paths 100%. So if I don't have these file names and paths, if they don't match up 100%, you're going to get an error message. Again, you don't want error messages. Troubleshooting Apache, if you're a novice, can be a lot of work. So let's make sure we put these in the correct directory. Certs will go in the certs directory. The private key will go in the private directory. All right, so first things first, we have in the home directory our private key. I'm going to copy that private key into slash, where did it go? I want to make sure I use the right file path. So I'm looking at my notes. Etsy SSL private. And again, I'm going to call this file djs.key to match with what's in my virtual host file. I see permission denied, not a big deal. Ooh, my password. What was my password? Hold on one second. And I don't have a password because I use just key, so do sudo-su to move into root. And we'll try cp. Azure user, discount juice shop, key.pem. Now we're going to copy, again, our private key to Etsy SSL private djs.cert. I am now going to move over my certificate files. So for that, I'm going to go into Etsy Apache 2. Actually, take that back, forget what I just said, into Etsy SSL certs. And I'm curious, Looks like root owns all these other files in here, so that'll be fine. And I'm going to do one file called djs.cert. And this is going to be my certificate for my service. So this is the certificate that the goat fatty certificate authority popped out. So copy this into my clipboard. Paste it in. And now I'm going to do my chain file. And I forget the order. I'm just going to try the root certificate authority cert first. And the intermediate certificate next. And now, with the files in the correct location, the moment of truth, let's reload Apache. Stale fails. So there's something quite not right. So we can take a look at the configuration now. So I'll show you a couple of troubleshooting techniques. The first one is going to be Apache CTL. So sudo Apache, I'll make this bigger so it's easier to see. And we're going to say config test. And this is going to tell us that there's an issue on line 20 of Apache 2, sites enabled, djs.conf. So let's do sudo vim etc sites available djs.conf. And if you just double check these file names, line 20 is this SSL engine. So let's say, okay, there's something wrong with the SSL configuration. And what I didn't show you yet is one other command we need to run to be able to enable SSL on our server. So let me quit out of this. And I'm going to enable SSL for our DJS virtual host. The command for that is sudo a2en mod SSL. And now mod SSL has been enabled, and I will be able to restart Apache 2. This asks us to restart, so I will follow the instructions. Sudo systemctl restart Apache 2. Still not working, so let's take a look now at config test. And now it's on line 22. It says that, hey, there's something wrong with this file path. The file does not exist or is empty. So let's look at sudo su, and let's look at etc Apache 2, sites available. Sorry, I just want sites enabled. And djs.conf. So yep, that is the correct path. So let's now actually double check the private, was it the private key? Oh, geez, now I'm losing my mind. What did it tell us to double check? Yeah, it is the private key file. You see what I did? My file is named djs.cert and not djs.key. This is definitely a private key. So how do we fix this? We move djs.cert to djs.key. And now, if I run config test, it says syntax OK. So with that, let's restart Apache, enter the passphrase. And this is kind of annoying because if you don't enter in the passphrase, it's going to give you an error message every single time Apache restarts. So one thing I'd recommend doing is removing the passphrase from your private key. This isn't too difficult to do. There's a couple of commands that we can run. So let's go back into root and go into etc SSL private. We have our key. I'm just going to copy this key to a back file. And then I'm going to use OpenSSL to remove the passphrase from this key. So OpenSSL. And we want to run, where did it go? RSA. And we're going to point it to our key file that has the passphrase. And we are going to say, output that without the passphrase. And now I have a key without a passphrase on it. So that way, when Apache restarts, every time it's not going to prompt you for the passphrase. And just like that, we don't get any error messages. No prompts for key passphrases or anything. And the step that I kind of breezed by over here is I removed the old key file just so it's not hanging around. So now if I access discountjuiceshop.com on HTTP, it's going to automatically redirect me to HTTPS. But there's another issue. So remember Nmap in my first video? I was using Nmap. I probably still have this in my history. And we were checking port 80, and at first port 80 was closed. And we went into the firewall and we opened it up. By default, port 443 is closed. So we have to go back into the Azure firewall and add in an inbound port rule, which again is under the VM, under networking. Click add inbound port rule. And we are going to say any source that's going to HTTPS. Click add. Again, this is not instantaneous. Just give it like 30 seconds or so to run. And while it's running, we can even run another Nmap scan just to see. Still filtered, filtered. Hey, and I thought I saw a change. Maybe I'm getting exciting for no reason. There it says, now it says open. So that was what, like maybe 30 seconds. And again, with service detection, -SV, it'll come back and tell us, yep, you're running Apache on Ubuntu. Any second now. It's running Apache over SSL on Ubuntu. And we'll notice, okay, look at this. This tab now, it redirected us to HTTPS. And I get this scary warning message because my certificate authority is not trusted by Firefox. There are certain certificate authorities that are trusted, and if you set up your own certificate authority, it's not going to be trusted by default browsers. So you get the scary warning, but because we trust our certificate authority, we can go under Advanced and say, yep, accept the risk and continue. And now we are loading this web page over HTTPS. And if I click on the little lock icon and go into connection is not secure, more information, I want to look at the details for the certificate. I want to make sure that our certificate chain is working correctly. So under security, I'm going to say view certificate. And you see the server certificate and the root certificate twice. So it did not quite work correctly. I might have downloaded the root certificate twice. So I need to fix this by going into my chain file and making sure that I have my intermediate certificate listed second. So let's take a closer look at our chain file. Go back over here, go into etc SSL private, certs, and if I cat out chain.cert, this second certificate, which is supposed to be the intermediate, ends in v1h. If I scroll up, the first certificate also ends in v1h. So I have the same certificate twice. And honestly, this is where I see students struggle the most, is that they mess up the certificate chain files. So how do we fix this? Relatively straightforward. All we got to do is edit the chain file. So I just did that, and currently now I have just one certificate in here. So I'm going to copy back over my intermediate certificate and install it. So back into my editor. Go down to the bottom of this file, insert mode. And right over here. Here is our intermediate certificate. Runs and ends in 6NA equal. Exit that. Write and quit. Restart Apache, do a config test, sure, syntax looks good. Restart Apache, that looks good. Reload Firefox, still not quite great. Now this is where you might potentially have to clear your browser cache if you have an oopsie and you accidentally copied over the same certificate twice and it doesn't change. You may need to clear your browser cache and try this again. In my case, it does not look like that was the case. I have my service certificate, my root authority certificate, and my goat fatty intermediate certificate. And another good way you can view this as well is in Chrome. And at least I thought Chrome was installed on Kali by default. Just try web browser. We'll see what this launches. Oh, it looks like it's just Firefox. Dang, I wanted to try Chrome as well. So let's do, go back to my VM, see if Chromium is on here. So Chromium is currently installing. Let's give it a second to finish. Pause the video while it does that. So with Chromium installed, let's try going to the Discount Juice Shop website. And I'm going to proceed. I want to look at the certificate just using one other tool because there may potentially be an issue. Certificate's not valid. Details. So you see here that the chain order is messed up. It says intermediate, root, and then service or server certificate. So I want the root certificate to come first, which means I need to go into that chain file now and flip the order. And for those of you that don't like Vim, I can show you how to do this using Nano. And what we can do is copy the certificate authority certificate into my clipboard. And I'm going to delete these lines and just paste it at the bottom. Oh shoot, too much, not what I wanted to do. Abort, abort, try it again. Great. Now I can just paste it down here. And these are flipped around. Save my chain file. Restart Apache. Reload our web page. Inspect the certificate. And now we have a root, intermediate, and server. This is it. This is what we wanted to see. Full certificate chain. Isn't that amazing? So yeah, I think that's good for now. And if you have any questions, of course, let me know. I didn't intend to have some of these issues, but I figured I'll keep them in the video and show you my troubleshooting methodologies. for when you inevitably run into problems. Definitely double check file names. Double check the chain order. Again, you should have intermediate certificate first, then the certificate authority certificate second. And then in a separate file, you want to have your server certificate. And sudo Apache CTL config test. This will tell you if there is an issue with your Apache configuration and specifically where the issue might potentially be. And it says, as a reminder, restart will shut down and relaunch all the Apache services versus reload, which will just reload the configuration. When in doubt, use restart. And some good testing tools. Firefox, as you saw, it's kind of ambiguous, like what comes first. That's why I installed Chromium. I like the way Chromium shows your certificate chain order a little bit better. And now that I fixed it, probably within Firefox, it's also going to show the correct order. So yep, we have server certificate, intermediate certificate, and the root certificate authority certificate. Now all in the correct order. And when in doubt, again, double check to make sure that your certificate order chain is correct using Google. I like how it puts it in a little bit nicer review. All right, that's it for now. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you later.